You know, when I came to NC State as a transfer student late 1930s, I was looking for a place to live, and I found it here at 1714 Park Drive, in a home owned by Professor and Mrs. L.E. Hinkle. Warm and friendly people, to say the least. And I had 3 roommates, Doug Allison, Wink Simpson, Bob Furman, and we all had such a happy time here with these delightful people. She would always have some goodies lying around. She loved to bake things, but she was such an attentive person. Every message that came to you was there. And if your mail came, she would look after you, put it in the right place, and she'd get on you about getting your laundry done the right way. And she meant for you to be orderly in her house, and it was a good discipline. But you grew to love her very much. Well, Romeo was in the Dean of Students' office, and E.L. Cloyd was the dean, and Romeo was the dean of men. And I got involved with him because I forgot what student activity it was I got into, but here was a person who was a great NC State person. He was a championship swimmer. He was in the ROTC at the time, but he was the kind of person that really laid his hand on you. He knew that you were a new person. He knew you were frightened about things and didn't know where you were really. But it was a kind of friendship that was more than just helping you get started. He could look inside you. He knew where the pain was, and he knew where the need for direction was, and you just grew to develop a real affection, and that was something that all of us, our generation here at NC State, got to know him that way. And Dean Cloyd was exactly the opposite. In those days, you had to you had to fill out a chit if you missed a class, and you had to get an excuse if you missed a class. I said, poor Mr. Cloyd would be horrified if he saw what was going on today. But it was one of those things where that was his job primarily. He'd come into the office, he was sitting there in the center of the room, he had his little book there, and he'd write out the stub if you missed a class or got an excuse or whatever. A different way of running a university, to say the least, but right in the center of that, the steadying gyroscope was Romeo LaFort. And for my generation here, everybody really adored the man. When I came over to NC State in 1938, I was looking around the campus from my academic home, and here it is. This was Tompkins Hall. It was where the School of Textiles was located in those days, and I got to learn how to weave cloth and spin yarn and dye fabrics. It was a great experience. But I think the most memorable part of my association with this building was down here in the basement, because it was here that we used to print the Technician, the student newspaper. And I handled the sports work, and I got to visit and work and travel with Doc Newton and Doc Sermon and Chick Doak, all those legendary figures, and Woody Jones and the great athletes we had in those days. It was a lot of fun working with Henry Rowe and all that gang. Great memories. Well, you know, back there in those days, we had what we called Greater University Day. Dr. Graham started this. And in those days, we'd charter a train and bring all the girls from WC to the thing would actually park on the rail out here outside of Riddick Stadium. And I didn't have a girlfriend in those days, but I was running. My buddy was Paul Lehman, who was the president of the student body. And his roommate was the May Queen out there, a wonderful girl named Janie Parker. And she had a roommate from down in Lumberton named Ida Howell. So Paul calls Janie and said, my friend doesn't have a girlfriend, can you bring Ida, be a blind date for him at the University Day? So that was the way it happened in 1941 in Riddick Stadium. And from then, this was We've been married 63 years now, and Ida has never lost her affection for NC State. In fact, she was in home economics at Meredith, and they made dresses out of the materials that those of us who were in the textile school would weave over here. And I have a picture really of her modeling one of those things in the 1940s, but that's the way it happened. And of course, the greatest debt I have to NC State is the fact that I've been married to her so happily for all these years. And they've been wonderful years, but Ida is the kind of person, if you're not doing what in her judgment is fair, right, or decent, she'll tell you. And that's what I've appreciated so much, besides being somebody that was such a great companion.
You know, if you were walking around here in 1938, you were really in the heart of the campus. So behind me here was Holiday Hall, where the Chancellor's office was, and we all reported to the Dean of Students and others over there from time to time. Peel Hall right here was the home of our instruction in English and history, the humanities. Liaison back there was where we all ate our meals. And on Saturday night, we had a wonderful special, 99 cents, steak, potatoes, all you could eat. And over here was old Watauga, where all of us sought to live before we graduated from here. And my room was up there on the corner on the second floor. And across the street was the student infirmary. And then behind Watauga over there, near the library, was the beloved YMCA, which wasn't for us, our student union, and that wonderful man, Ed King, who did so much to make us all feel at home at NC State. This was it. This is where we lived, worked, ate, slept, and had a great time at this grand old university. Clark Dormitory was my first administrative home at NC State. I was the chief dormitory advisor that year, and my office was in the building up on the back side of the first floor. You know, there used to be a staircase right underneath my feet here that went down to a barbershop underneath here, and then there was a railing right along here. And one of the pastimes we had in those days was to come down here and we'd sit on the railing and watch the busloads of Meredith girls come and go as they went downtown and back to the campus. And we had a good time waving at each other. You know, the whole temper of sitting on this railing changed after December 7, 1941, because those of us who were sitting here could see busloads of boys going back and forth in these Army trucks, headed for Camp Jackson and other military training bases, Fort Bragg and places like that. And we all knew that our time was coming. And my class of 1941 was really the very first war class from NC State, where so many of our classmates made that commitment to serve our country. I don't think anybody who was around here in the late 30s and beginning of World War II will ever forget that experience, because you knew that something was happening to our country and to us that you'd never be the same. And all of a sudden, this class of mine, it's had about 220 people in it. And when we got through at commencement, literally, the boys who were in ROTC went right off that stage straight down to Fort Benning or somewhere. And we have, I think as a matter of record, the highest casualty rate of any class. You don't ever forget that, especially if you were lucky enough to come back. But what I meant by the transition is that when you spend time all over the world, as this class did, thrown with cultures you've never seen, experiences that you can't get out of a textbook or anything else, you suddenly understand the role this country had to play in the world. And that was particularly hard for this generation to get people to understand, because there was so much conservatism. Let's withdraw, let's come back and be only ours. We'll build a fence around the world ourselves. And, well, this generation, which Tom Brokaw wrote about, had that sense of vision. It was not a group of men and women who went around beating their chests saying, hey, look at us. They understood what the problem was. They went to work, and look at what they did. And
the reason I can speak with such feeling about this is that I was in a position where I could see it and watch it and feel it. And I saw what it did to North Carolina, and certainly in the southern region. And it comes about because you have a place like NC State where young men and women who come in here off the farm and out of the small towns, suddenly the whole world opens up. And it's a huge challenge. It's a great sense of release. I'm going to be somebody in this, and I'm going to contribute something here that this institution has qualified me to do. I became involved with the President's office in 1956, and from then until 1986, I maintained an office right here in the corner to keep my association with NC State active, alive, and vigorous. Those years were wonderful years for me, and it's been such a thrilling experience to see this university grow into one of the great institutions of our country. We've got, I think, first to recognize the depth and expanse of change that has taken place, particularly in agriculture, for example, or what we're, it's so interesting here because you can go in one building and you're talking about the heat shield on the rockets going to the outer space. In the next building, you're talking about hybridization of a commodity that people buy in the grocery store. Well, that's what makes NC State so exciting. Now, again, though, it won't reach those heights unless you pay attention to the people, the geniuses that work around here. Now, they would resent being called that, but that's really what it is, first-rate people, and we've got them. The state has got to make up its mind that it's going to pay for this, because this kind of operation is never free. It has to be free of the interference, though, and it has to have the ability to move a bit, Most of us, as we grow older, really resist change. We don't want things to be different. But the business of this institution is to make things different, and you have to understand that when you're a part of it. But that's the glory of it. And when you feel that an institution isn't asking questions or isn't making you lie awake at night because it's doing something that bothers you a little bit, then you better get worried, because then it's not really getting done what it needs to get done. But I don't worry about NC State in that sense. I've watched it now for a half century, and I've seen it grow from what it was, a small operation in the 30s, to now it's one of the large, massive undertakings in the whole United States. And it's an international institution. It's an interspace program. It's a place that touches the hand of the farmer and the school teacher and just us ordinary folks. And it's going to keep on doing that. But as long as it's a free institution, as long as it's alert, as long as it's budgeted the way it should be, North Carolina will have an asset that it cannot duplicate anywhere else in its being. Now, North Carolina needs a place like that desperately, because we don't have enough of our young people going to college. We don't have enough of our young people coming to NC State in the traditional way that we have tried to do. But the vitality is here, it remains here, it's strong. And one of the real delights is just to come over here at commencement, sit up there in the gallery somewhere, and watch the experience of all these mothers and fathers who've given every dollar they've had to give you the experience of walking across that stage, knowing that when that event happens, you've gone forever, because you're not a kid anymore, you're on your own. But NC State has done an incredible job with limited resources to create that generation after generation after generation. Well, my plea now is for the state of North Carolina to understand that, to know how important this place is, and to take care of it economically in a rational, reasonable way. But we're blessed in having this faculty here. We're blessed with the support it gets from its alumni. So all I can say is, let's go on. That's my little sermon.